Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Karlene and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be hanging out as I prepare the easiest, most tender pork ribs. The boys are home from school holidays, so I've got boys aged 10, 6 and 1, and I don't want to spend all day in the kitchen, but I do want to prepare easy recipes to feed my family which tastes delicious. I'm going to share with you an easy bread roll recipe from scratch and a twist on an old favorite dessert. If you love easy recipes, simple living and homemaking, then you are in the right place, and welcome to my home. The first thing that I'm going to start preparing for today is our slow cooked pork ribs. This is the second time that I have made this recipe. I'm saying this recipe with like little inverted commas because I looked at a few recipes online and then chopped them all up to compile them into what I thought would be the easiest way to prepare this meal with the most flavor with the least amount of effort. I will detail the quantities that I used below. We're going to start with some salt to season our ribs and our meat, some sweet paprika, a hint of cayenne pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, some dried oregano. I obviously need to reorganize my dried herb stash because they're looking a bit sad. Adding some brown sugar, some ground black pepper. Give this a good stir so we can massage this into our pork ribs, adding extra flavor to our finished dish. To make my life easier when it comes to serving dinner, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slice these ribs into portions, which also makes it easier to fit into my slow cooker. Now, I did mention earlier that I do have 3 boys, so this obviously won't be enough to feed all of us a whole meal, and that is because it's going to be added to our leftovers from last night. So my husband cooked up some steak last night and I have a bit of salmon left over in the fridge, so tonight's going to be a potluck of leftovers. And you'll know if you've been in my kitchen before, I hate wasting food, so tonight's potluck sounds good to me. Use everything up. Now, I mentioned before I had made ribs in the slow cooker before and they were really good, and the mixture that I added to the slow cooker was like a homemade barbecue sauce and beef stock and all of these ingredients, but I came across one that literally said half a cup of water, and I thought, you know what, if I'm going to add a dry rub, it's going to have some flavor, it's going to have that slow cooked time where it's going to be cooking for 6 to 8 hours. I'm going to give this a shot and see if it tastes as good as last time. And you know what? It did. It was so good. They were so tender, and it was just water. I know that a lot of families are conscious of their grocery bill, so I recommend you try this recipe. Now, that is the hardest bit done. I'm just going to gently place my ribs on top of that water. I didn't want to tip the water on top and like wash away the dry rub. So we are gently adding that on top, and then I'm going to leave that to cook on low for 6 to 8 hours. I love being able to get dinner sorted earlier in the morning, and that just makes me feel like I've got my day free for projects and activities with the kids. I've always enjoyed being in the kitchen, but this is the first time that I've ever had a stand mixer. What do they call it? Like a freestanding mixer? I only got this off Facebook Marketplace for like $15, and it does the job fine, but I never really appreciated how much easier it is to make doughs and breads with it, because I've always done that sort of by hand when I've tried, and I highly recommend getting one. You can even just go on secondhand like I did. Works fine. It just makes it so much easier and less daunting when kneading bread. I will link the recipe below of the one that I used. I was out of milk, which is what prompted me to pick this particular recipe. So if you wanted like a milk-free one, then go ahead and try this. Now, even though I'm using the instant yeast, I still like to leave it to proof because I feel as though it just helps the bread rolls rise so much nicer, even though I did kind of forget about them and they kind of flopped slightly, just a little bit. I may have overproofed them, like again, because I was sidetracked in the garden planting potatoes. Now that my stand mixer has mixed all of our dough together, I'm just going to peel it away from the sides of the bowl, and I don't want to give myself any extra washing up, so I'm just going to work this into a ball one-handed and then just coat the same bowl with some oil so that the dough doesn't dry out while it has its first rise. Then I'm going to go pop it out in the sun, and then I'm going to go join the dough out in the garden. where it sits out in the sun because it's a cold and windy day today, and I am going to continue with my gardening project. Now the kids have been in and out of this back door, so I'm knee deep in flies. Welcome back to my kitchen. Now our dough has doubled in size. Now tell me why this feels so good. Ready? Okay, I'm not a pimple popper, but this would be like the equivalent, I think, the kitchen version, not the bathroom version. Okay, so I'm just checking my dough to make sure I haven't overproofed it because, I mean, I've done that before. All right, we're good to roll. Like what I did there. Now, yeah, I'm going to use a whole water butter to grease my tray because I don't have any spray and cook, and I could put it onto paper towel and use that, but like why bother and give myself more work to do? Just use the straight butter, right? That's fine, isn't it? Is that weird? Do you do that or is it just me? Anyway, the rolls didn't stick, so I mean, it worked. I really enjoy this next part where you get to massage the dough and get it into all of your rings. Just kidding, I'm just putting that to the side, hoping that the baby doesn't climb up there on that stool and throw them in the bin, like he has other things in my kitchen. Yeah, I love this part, just massaging it and then, you know, counting out all of the, you know, the little rolls that I need, making sure that I've got enough to fill my tray. It just feels so nice to work with your hands and know that I made it from scratch and that my family love them and enjoy them when I make them. It just makes me so happy. Now I am going to be honest with you. I didn't read the instructions on how to shape the rolls, if there was a different way to do it because they were meant to be French bread rolls, but I just did it the way that I learned to do it from watching other people, and I just rolled with that. So if you have a different technique that you feel works better, like I've made knot rolls before and done different shapes and things like that, but this is just how I do like everyday bread rolls. So I'll add the link below to the recipe, so if she has a different technique then great, otherwise this is just how I do it because I find it easy. Now we need to cover them up so they don't dry out, and you would normally do like spray and cook on the cling wrap so it doesn't stick to your bread rolls and cause them to flatten and misshapen. So I'm just going to drizzle some oil on mine because that's what I've got, and I'm going to cover those up loosely and then set them in a warm place for them to rise. Later on in the afternoon, when I had a minute, I got ready to make dessert. So with baking recipes, they say a room temperature egg, and I'm not always organized, so I'm just taking that out now. And I'm going to prep all of my dry ingredients and have them ready to go in my mixing bowl, so I can just add the milk, egg, vanilla essence right before assembling the dessert and putting it in the oven. I will link this recipe below, or the Inspo recipe below I should say, because I did add a special ingredient to it to make a twist on an old favorite, and I just realized I didn't even tell you what we're making. So it's self-saucing chocolate pudding. My kids love this, served over ice cream. They have not gotten sick of it. The hot fudgy sauce is so good, and I almost always have everything on hand so I can whip it together really quickly. It's easy, it's a crowd pleaser, the boys love it. Stick around and I'll share with you what I add to it to kick it up a notch. Okay, it's now 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I've pulled the ribs out of the slow cooker and it's time to make the barbecue sauce. Now I did notice a lot of recipes, you know, were saying, you know, add ketchup and then the brown sugar to make it into a barbecue sauce, and I have maybe less than a cup left in my barbecue sauce bottle straight from Coles. So I'm just going to ramp up the flavors that are already in there because one, it's easier, quicker, and by adding more flavors to the current sauce, it stops it from getting sort of watered down after it's being baked. I don't know if you've had it before where you've ordered ribs out and it's like when the sauce is almost like clear, you're like, you know, it's not going to be that strong in flavor. And I wanted this to be a really sticky, sweet barbecue sauce. It just makes application really easy too. I slathered this on and then I basted these ribs, I think 3 times in total. I just kept on going until the sauce bottle was empty, and the end result was so tasty and so flavoursome. Everybody loved it. While the ribs are baking to get crispy, and basted. I'm just knocking up a really quick coleslaw. I just use the mandolin, and my secret ingredient to make a coleslaw with a pork dish taste so good is an apple. So I've got in my bowl some grated carrot, some sliced shallots from the garden that originally came from Coles that I just kept and regrew in water. Some, I think it was just a drumhead cabbage that I got this week, sliced fine, and then I'm just going to use the mandolin in the thin julienne slice, because you don't want to grate the apple because it kind of gets a bit sloshy. I want it to be crispy and crunchy and sweet. And this was a beautiful side dish to serve with our slow cooked tender pork ribs. I like to keep the dressing really simple. I use pickle juice from sweet spice to gherkins. These were finished off, I think maybe the day before or the day before that. So I'm just using some of that pickle juice for the tanginess. I didn't have any fresh lemons or anything like that, but I like that style of pickle juice because it is also sweet. A sprinkle of salt and pepper, and then just some mayonnaise, and that's it. Just taste test until you're happy, and that's ready to go. So here is how our ribs look at the end of being slow cooked, and then a quick blast in the oven while getting basted. We've got our apple coleslaw and our bread rolls as well. Kids ate some before dinner was even served because they were starving. Oh, I forgot that I had made crispy potatoes that night, and I tossed them in like your shelf style Parmesan cheese, and they were so good. Now, while all of our oven baked goods were cooling off so that it didn't burn the kids' mouths, I was assembling the last steps of our chocolate self-saucing pudding so that can be baking while we are eating our meal. First up, I need to melt some butter. So while that is getting melted, I'm going to stir through our dry ingredients so that they're well incorporated. Adding my room temperature egg after I had dug a well in the center with my fingers, can you tell? I'm going to add our milk. You can substitute with almond milk or dairy-free milk alternatives. I've made it with both, like almond milk, oat milk, and like cow's milk, and each time like it's been like a no fail. Adding in our melted butter. Now, last but not least, we need our special ingredient, which is mini marshmallows. Now, I've already greased my baking tray with a wad of butter and I'm just going to sprinkle some mini marshmallows to cover the bottom of my pie dish. You can use any dish that you have. I just pick one that has a lid so I can store it overnight for leftovers, and we're going to tip our pudding mixture over the top. I was struck with this idea because I thought, what's really nice and hot chocolate? Marshmallows. And I thought, what would be really cool inside a chocolate self-saucing pudding that has its own fudge sauce? Marshmallows. So it's like a hot chocolate hot pudding. And it worked. It was so delicious. I have made this before. I did bigger marshmallows last time, and I feel like the mini marshmallows, just because they're smaller, they don't break through to the surface and then overcook as quickly, because when they're overcooked they sort of go like brown and crunchy, and they're not so like gooey, like in a good way. But I will link the recipe inspo below, and then you can just add your mini marshmallows if you wish, just like we did. I remember in high school in hospitality class, I had a Mrs. K. She was a wonderful teacher, and she taught us this trick of pouring the boiling water onto the back of a spoon so it doesn't end up boring a hole into your pudding mixture and then also splashing you with boiling hot water while you're trying to make dessert. So thanks Mrs. K for that tip. I'm like 37 this year, was that 20 years ago? And I still remember. The kids have finished their dinner and it is time for dessert. I did overcook it slightly, so it has lost a bit of its pretty pink and white colour for the marshmallows. It's slightly browned, but it still worked out. It still worked out really well. And I don't like to overcook it because then the hot fudge sauce gets absorbed by like pudding. So you can see it's got some delicious hot fudge sauce on there, so I didn't leave it too long. And this is going to be devoured by all three of my children. This simple and easy dessert is so quick to put together, but it is dangerously good. Dangerous because you probably have everything that you need to make it any day of the week. I'm trying to fish out some of the melted gooey marshmallows because it smells so delicious and it is so tasty. You definitely need to try it. Well, that's a wrap for everything that I made in my cozy kitchen on this windy day. Thank you for stopping by and for joining me. As always, I will link some other videos that I think you might enjoy below. So thank you, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now.